So my name is Shauna Johnston and I work for a charity called the Outdoor Partnership as an outdoor activity development officer. So far in my work, and many others have probably experienced different things, I'm finding kind of two different types work really well. So some people really enjoy a more calming activity, so something like outdoor cooking, walking, wood carving, where they can maybe connect with other people, try something they haven't done before. Maybe that skill like wood carving is taking their mind off things in their day-to-day life that are stressing them out. And then on the total opposite to that, some people enjoy quite adrenaline rush activities like gorge walking, coast-steering, kayaking, rafting. And I think it's really important that for someone like me who offers these activities, that we really appreciate that there are different people that struggle with a range of mental health conditions, that really appreciate the balance of both of those activities. Yeah, so a few years ago, I worked with a charity called Adferiad, and we did I think it was about a 6 to 8 week cold water therapy program where we swam and hiked to swimming spots across the whole of Carmarthenshire and Swansea, and we explored kind of like the sea, the coastline, lakes, rivers, waterfalls, and I think it was such a great program because even though we'd set in stone where we were going and what we were going to do, there was so much flexibility still around the distance we walked. If people wanted to full on submerge themselves in the cold water, or if they maybe just wanted to dip their toes or eat their lunch by the water. So I think that was a fantastic program for me. And I think the feedback that we had from that was from the young people was fantastic, and also the staff that came with them. And I think maybe that was mainly to do with the flexibility around they could maybe design the program themselves, so they could maybe choose the next location or choose the next body of water, choose the distance, and choose kind of how far they felt comfortable going into the water. Yeah, so on all of our programs, we measure things through questionnaires. So we try to give them things we call start and end forms. So maybe measuring things like, how kind of healthy did they feel at the start of the program compared to at the end of the program, or even things like, had they made any new friends or any new connections. I think it's really important to remember that every one of us does activities for a variety of different reasons. It might be for your mental health, it might be for your physical fitness, or it might be just to meet new friends. So questionnaires is just a really simple way that we collect things on all of our programs. But I think on some of the programs where we partner with, for example, charities like Adferiad, it's really important to talk to the staff that have supported us with the program. So Adferiad had recovery practitioners, and it was really important that because they knew the young people better than I did. I wasn't going to get to know them very well. Well, I did get to know them well over 8 weeks, but not as well as they did. And I think it was really important to kind of ask them what they felt like had changed in the young people. And one of the things they would say was, when they come in for therapy or group sessions, they've got like reference points or points of like conversation. But I think one of the main things was that the young people felt like it was giving them something to look forward to. So again, going back to that program specifically, some of them were in college and some of them did have kind of part-time jobs. But because, we were quite organised with the structure of the program, they knew the dates quite far in advance for the 6 to 8 weeks. Can't remember how long it was. So they had something to look forward to. They knew they were going to be hanging out with their friends. Feedback from the young people about the way that, they were trying new things, they were achieving something. So maybe it was like lighting a fire for the first time outside, or, cooking outside for the first time, or walking quite long, longer distances than what they were used to. But again, that feedback from the recovery practitioners and the staff that we were working with that, knew the young people better than I did, for me is invaluable, because often young people can be quite, what's the word? Maybe they don't big themselves up enough. So they, they're like, I'm like, you just walked up that massive hill, and they're like, yeah. But, when they go back then and they're talking to someone they may be a bit more comfortable with, they're so proud of themselves that they've, like I said, they've lit that fire, or they've chopped a log, or they've hiked up that hill. So I think, mental health conditions can range quite they vary from one thing to another. And actually, a lot of people that I know that have mental health conditions, it's not just one thing on its own. There's maybe a few different things. So I think going back to the first point I made, it's really nice for them to be able to experience different things that can make them proud. So they might be proud, like I said, of their skills in bushcraft and outdoor cooking, or their fitness skills when they climb a mountain, or the fact that they've managed to brave the cold sea. So I just think having a session that they can feel they can achieve something is really important, whether it's making something or walking a distance that they haven't walked before. I think we've got to a point now where physical needs are often met. I'm not saying always, but I think, it's, I suppose, a bit more straightforward for a provider who's providing a walk or a surfing session to say, well, that person's in a wheelchair, they will need X, Y, and Z. Obviously, it's not always as straightforward as that, but you can see that someone's in a wheelchair. So I often think that mental health conditions are quite hard for a person, because if you haven't filled in a medical form before going, or if there was no space to kind of like explain your needs, you then have to do it on the day, like I have anxiety, or, I have PTSD or something like that. So I often feel like it's about treating people as individuals, because one person with anxiety is totally different to the next person with anxiety, and one person with PTSD is very different to the next person with PTSD. And I think it's about taking time. If someone's written on a form and say, I'm coming to your session tomorrow, I have anxiety, give them a ring, WhatsApp, whatever their preferred method is, and say, what can we do to make sure the session runs more smoothly? Something else I found when I'm working with especially younger people is that having, okay, maybe a little element of surprise if you're having a little hot chocolate or something at the end, but all in all, actually having quite good structure to the session. So I think the same when we're putting on any session, I don't think it matters if it's a specific mental health session or not, is when we're sending out the introductory WhatsApp message or an email, that we are really clear and say, someone with a blue jacket is going to meet you outside, the main reception at this time. Please don't worry if you're a little bit late. The sessions, there's I'm seeing on a lot of sessions now that there's a bit of a buffer. So maybe if the walk starts at 10, you're asking people to come by 9:30 and have teas and coffee and biscuits beforehand. So I think for me, in my line of work, I'm obviously linking with the provider to provide the session, and I think it's about making sure that I'm happy that that provider is inclusive in all of their practices. But I really think it's sometimes to do with that before section, because at the end of the day, they've signed up, which is great, but I think it is that signing up email and maybe a little phone call or a WhatsApp message just to maybe get a bit more information about how the session can kind of be adapted to suit their needs. I decided to focus on older people as part of the program. So it wasn't per se a mental health specific program. Some of them had arthritis, some of them had hip replacement. But we did, again, remembering all those little things I just said to you. There was meeting at 9:30, session starts at 10, there was tea and biscuits available. There was options to kind of opt in and out of certain parts if they wanted to rest, again, because of their maybe conditions. But one lady had actually come on that session and her daughter signed her up because she was a bit, maybe didn't use social media as well as, what we do. And she actually phoned me after the first session and said, I lost my husband a few months ago, and I've been really, I didn't think I'd been struggling that much, really. But when I came to the session, I realised that, I hadn't been sleeping. When I started talking about it a bit more, I hadn't been sleeping and I hadn't, maybe coped with it very well. But I do think that for me, I realised that she'd opened up in a time that we'd given them a bit of free time. So again, they'd gone and done the walk, they'd come back, we'd made like soup over the open fire as part of a bit of bushcraft session. And then they'd had some free time to kind of either sit and enjoy the fire or go for a little walk. And I think, again, having structure is great. We're going for the walk at this time, lunch will be at this time. But again, I do think for some people it's really important to like not rush from one thing to another. And she'd opened up to another participant that she didn't know at all before the start of the session about losing her husband and how, she was struggling with sleep and stuff because obviously she'd lost him from the house and it was a bit scary for her. So I do think for me, stories like that are so important because I don't feel like we'd really done anything specific on the session to support her needs. But when I maybe received the email, I'd realised that actually the structure of the session had allowed her to open up to another participant on the group. Yeah, so I think going back to the start of the conversation as well, I think, like I said, I really think it's important that either we offer a range of things or we listen to what they want to do. So again, I think, I know one of my colleagues has worked a lot with, young people who are maybe not in employment, education, and, maybe they're struggling with drug and alcohol abuse. And they have really taken to kind of more of the adrenaline rush activities. They've done gorge walking, coasteering, caving, things that maybe are so scary to them that it just takes their mind off all the worries they have in their day-to-day life. Me, I wouldn't say there's any particular setting that's better than any other, but I do think it's important to offer a range of things so that the person themselves can make their own decision. Because of course, I have, my favourite place that I like to go if I'm feeling sad or if I want to pick me up. So, I know what makes me feel happy, and that would be going to the beach. So whereas other people would want to escape to the mountains or go kayaking on the river. So I think for me, if I'm going to get someone on a program that lasts 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it would one of my main goals would be, even if it has to be an 8-week walking program, get them walking in different locations. So, are they loving the coastal path because they can look out on the sea? Do they enjoy kind of river so they can hear the noise of the river? Do they enjoy mountains because it feels like an achievement and they're sweating and it's, you've reached the top, whereas some people just don't care about that. So for me, I wouldn't say there's no one particular setting that's better for your mental health, but I do think that for me, the main goal would be for them to experience a different setting so that they can make their own decision.